Yes, let's do this. We're going to end the day with hopefully have a little bit of fun. And it's been a long day, so let's get going. I want to start with a quick story. April of 2018, I'm at a tech conference in Las Vegas, Nevada, in a sprawling, poorly lit hotel conference room with carpeting from the 1980s, very different than a room like this in the US. And I am experiencing a tech talk that's tanking. Very poor. We've all experienced it in some way. The speaker very clearly is not prepared, talking too fast, talking too slow, having to recap something that they already said. The audience knows it. The audience is resisting the urge to check their phone or looking at the back door, seeing if they can make a clean break for the exit. It's not a good situation. And you're probably thinking, like, judgmental American. And you would be right. However, unfortunately for me, I was the one giving the talk. I used to tell stories, technical stories, with more zigs and zags than you would find in this carpeting pattern. Maybe you know somebody that tells stories like this. Maybe you tell stories like this. All over the place. And you're not to blame. They're not to blame. Really, I wasn't to blame for that because telling technical stories is really hard. Why is it so hard? Well, okay, let's break this down. First of all, this is an actual diagram from the AWS website. How are you supposed to communicate all of the complexity contained in a diagram like this in a simple conversation or a blog post or a video? You can do it, but there's so much context there. There's so much assumptions. There's so many different levels and layers of complexity that you have to describe before you even get into it all. And not only is that complicated, turns out we're complicated too. Everybody learns differently. Everybody has different opinions. Imagine that, a room full of developers of opinions. We have different emotions. We have different neurodiversities. And so this is so hard to do. How do we tell effective stories through our blog posts, through our documentation, our guides, podcasts, videos, any sort of content that you're creating when it comes to a technical topic? That's what we're going to talk about today. For me, I like to take a step back from all of this complexity and remember what the main point is to begin with. With all of the content that we produce for a technical audience, we're trying to help the audience. We're trying to help the reader. We're helping the listener. It's not about us knocking it out of the ballpark or sounding perfect. It's about being in service. This is what I do at Mux, by the way. My name is Dave Kiss. I am the community lead at Mux, which is Mux is a video infrastructure product for developers. Help you build video into your product. It's very complicated how video works. And so the engineers internally need help telling that story of what it is that they worked on and how it brings value to the end user. So I try to help take those technical topics and turn them into real stories. So today I'm going to share the formula that works for me on how I can help tell these technical stories. It took me a long time to understand this, and I've come a long way, I think, since that Vegas talk. But I'm going to share some examples as well so you can tell better stories with your technical content. Does that sound okay? Cool. Let's go. So I'm going to start with 3 people that changed the way that I tell stories. These people know nothing about code, by the way. But they have an impact, and everything that they shared is able to be translated into a technical audience. So let's start with number 1 here. This is Jennifer King. She was a speaking coach of mine in the organization called Stand and Deliver. They're based out of San Francisco. And the best lesson that I learned from Jennifer King was to build relevance. And this is immediately. This is right out of the gate. As soon as you start your writing in your guide, in your blog post, in your presentation,
You want to get that reader or the listener nodding along, like this guy. I don't know who that is, but that's pretty fitting. How do we do this? How do we get somebody aligned with you and feel like your message is resonating? We need to, when we think back to that like technical diagram, we need to understand what the main point is there, and we need to front load all of the content with as soon as possible in the first 20 seconds of your message, in the first couple sentences of your post, to really build up and get their attention right out of the gate. So instead of deliver, they call this the ramp theory, which is like right out of the gate, again, what can you say to bring that elephant of your story all the way up to the beginning so that you understand contextually where you're at. And then further, they have this formula that I use for every communication I do to really break down and help you think through and organize where your story is actually going. So this framework helps you to identify what that elephant is, what that relevance is. I love this spreadsheet that they put together, or this worksheet that they put together. And number 2 there is the one that we're talking about for this build relevance, is what is the main point? Why should they care? Why should the person listening continue to listen to you? This whole worksheet helps me sort of organize what I'm actually trying to say and where this is all going. So let's take a look at some actual examples of this. So this is a screenshot from the MUX documentation. And in this particular guide, we're talking about how you can clip videos in using our API. But we show you right at the top, what are you going to get out of this? We got the table of contents. You know, yes, I'm in the right spot. What a great feeling. We even list the use cases, right? Like, what could you possibly achieve with this? Again, right out of the gate. So you, as an engineer or an engineer reading this, knows whether or not they're going to get what they're looking for as a result. And we get tons of really great compliments about our docs because we put so much effort into making them a product. We really care about the revisions and the language that we use to make sure it's beginner friendly and anybody can pick it up, understands what they're trying to get done when going through the docs. Here's another look at a blog post that we put together. This is from my colleague Darius, and he's talking about React. I know it's probably more reviews. I don't know. He's a big React guy, but look what he highlights here in these first 2 paragraphs. They're a lot. He's like acknowledging this is like a migration to a new technology that's going to be a little rocky, but that it was worthwhile and it's okay. We got you. By the end of this, you'll have a pretty good idea of whether or not it's going to work for your organization. This is a 20-minute blog post, a 20-minute read. So if we don't do that work up front to make sure that the reader knows this is where they're meant to be, we have no chance at them continuing on. And how did it do? It did really well. We had some really great feedback from Seb on Twitter, on X, featured in Primogen, which is another just coding sort of streaming show. They do a lot of YouTube videos. Featured in TLDR newsletter. This is completely organic. None of this is paid. And even linked back in official documentation from other companies that actually created this, like as part of creating some of this technology. So I would call that a really great success. And you might think like, well, Darius he's famous. Of course everybody Darius is not famous. Darius has maybe a famous dog. He's very friendly, approachable, normal human. But we did a lot of work, and he is a talented writer. We did a lot of work to make sure that we put these elements into the stories that we're telling. So that's number 1. With ways that you can create strong developer content is to try to make sure that you're building your relevance as soon as you can. Number 2, create tension. This is from Larry McEnerney. Took me a while to get his last name right. Creating tension. So I was introduced to this gentleman from a writing class that I took through a company called Ritza Co. and we took it with a couple of colleagues at work, where this was, for me, the biggest takeaway that I had from the writing class. And it was really the first assignment when we were thrown into this writing class was to watch an hour and 20 long minute video of Larry, who is the former director of the writing program at University of Chicago, talking about the craft of writing effectively. If this doesn't create tension, I don't know what does. This idea of me sitting watching a professor give a lecture, I was ready to just duck out of the class at that point. But honestly, one of the best videos that I've seen in terms of writing. There's a reason it has, I think, like 10 million views or something on YouTube. Larry, here's his argument. I'll save you the hour 20, unless, well, you probably should go watch. It's really great. Larry says that the way that we've been trained to write, historically, traditionally, I should say, is that what we're trying to do is convey the thing that's in our head and put it into the listener, or the reader's head, to the listener's head, like the claw game at the arcade. Pick the topic and just plop it in there. And Larry will yell about this for the rest of his life. Says this is not the job of your writing anymore, ever. Larry's argument is the job of your writing and the content, the storytelling that you're doing, is to identify a particular group of people and change their perspective from where they were to where you want them to go. And the job of your text and your writing moves them. It's a simple, difficult, but simple idea. This concept of telling your story versus identifying the outcome. And I think, at least for me, this was something I really struggled with. I knew what I wanted to say, but I didn't really know why it mattered. I didn't really know what I was hoping for the listener to get out of it. And if you can sort of pull apart those two different, here's the story that I'm telling, but here's ultimately what I hope it changes in you. Sometimes it's a business change, but sometimes it's just like it inspires somebody, or it excites somebody, or it gives them a new point of view. So here's some ways that we do that over on the Mux blog again. I'm going to look at another post from Darius talking about React server actions, where he says, interacting with the server used to be painful in React. That first sentence, if you disagree with it, you're ready to start a fight. Soft punch. Ready to soft punch Darius. You want to have a conversation if you disagree. Same with the form element here that we're talking about. If you're really passionate about HTML5 forms and that they're not broken, you're ready to have a conversation here. It starts a lot of discussion, a lot of commentary. Sometimes you need to have a little bit of a thick skin in situations like this because the trolls will come out and you will start to get comments that you need to stand your ground, have your opinion, and really be present in that conversation. Maybe you even change your point of view as a result of the discussion that's created, but it's the fact that the discussion is created. And the thing that you produced, the story that you told, served a purpose in that moment. It doesn't have to serve a purpose forever. I think we have a lot of fear around this idea of publishing something that's temporary. If it's temporary, but it moves the conversation forward, then it's meaningful. I'm convinced that this one in particular was a disgruntled employee and not a random internet commenter, because here's a look at the Mux office. We have an awesome coffee bar, and you can just be the judge of seeing me and Darius sitting there drinking some caffeine. So they kind of nailed it on that one. But here's another look at another post that we worked on. This was with Gary, where he says right in the headline, if you can read this, your browser captions are broken. We do a lot of work with video. Somebody approached me on this one. They were like, isn't that clickbait? And I disagreed with that. I think that clickbait could be when there's no substance to your argument. When you get to the page, but then you realize, this is a complete sham. Gary, let me make sure I get this right, is an editor of the Web VTT specification and a chair of the Time Text Working Group. So he's can't think of any more of a qualified person to say this statement. It's like the person that you think of when it comes to captioning video on the web. And how did it do? Again, started a discussion. I use Hacker News because it's the easy measure, but it's not the most qualified measure. But it's a great measure to see what opinions are in the engineering community. So that is number 2. Create tension as a result of your storytelling. Have an opinion. And number 3, this is from Matthew Dix, who is an American novelist, and he's a competitive storyteller. Competes at like the Moth Story Slam competitions. I think those are nationwide in the US anyway. He says, share your perspective. Don't just tell somebody else's story, tell your own story. These 3 things they're simple, right? But they're not easy to pull all this together into effective content. Share your perspective. Tell your story. What is the part of your tone and your voice that adds something different to a specific topic, a guide, the way that you teach? Maybe somebody resonates more with you in the way that you talk versus just how other guides exist out there. I found this screenshot that I had to include from Zach Goldie. We see this kind of stuff everywhere, this marketing language for dev tools. Brutal. There's nothing unique about any of this. It doesn't make your product stand out. And so we try to avoid and shy away from language like this and say what you actually mean. Don't just say the thing that feels like it fits on a marketing website. Here's another side-by-side of how we could write newsletters at Mux if we were to just take the plain approach. And yeah, maybe it communicates the information, but there's no substance to that. There's no personality to it. On the right is one we actually sent out that hopefully shares a little bit about our personality and what we like to represent and what our brand stands for. So I think being open about letting your own voice shine through is extremely important. Here's some different ways that we do this at Mux. We glued together, this is a blog post from Mark, another colleague. We glued together content moderation to stop soccer pirates and saved $750,000. I think that's only a story Mux can tell. I don't know for sure, but the way that this was all laid out was such an interesting journey, like some of the journeys that we heard today and the talks we heard today, that it shines through as unique pieces of content, unique stories. And how did this one do? Again, really great discussion around the whole concept of not only sharing our story, but building some tension along the way and having some hierarchy built in as well. Mark does not like to write. In fact, this was Mark's first blog post. I think it's something that probably a lot of folks struggle with. Is that, I mean, it was kind of funny because we like to write code, but we don't like to write like words. That's very common. It's very common, but I think a lot of it has to do with we don't feel prepared to write, not that we don't actually like to write. Because when you feel prepared, it feels, for me anyway, it feels energizing. So we can't just like go into every story that we tell with creating tension. Like you're not going to read an API reference with tension built into it, right? Like that's kind of awkward. So we have different traits that we use at Mux that we identify as different components that we build into our storytelling that we kind of turn on and off at times depending on what those pieces of content require, depending on the target audience and the context, right? Here's a little look about how we embody these traits. In certain circumstances, they're kind of like spices in cooking, right? Like a little bit of salt and pepper, a little bit of thyme. I don't know what kind of spices you like here, but you're not going to put curry powder on everything. It's very strong. So we have to be really pick and choose when it's appropriate to apply these spices. So we consider them almost like little levers, little dials that we turn up and down. In certain circumstances, in API documentation, it's not going to be helpful for us to try to be playful or funny. People are trying to get something done. right? So we turn that part down. But on stuff like this or social media, we'll be relatable and helpful and playful. A little bit, let our voice shine through in ways that we might not in other circumstances. Wow, I'm ahead of time here. I guess that's good news. Okay. So those are the three people that really change the way that I tell my stories and I think about storytelling. But I want to talk about why this matters, like what you personally stand to gain, and really like take off my mucks. Like it really doesn't have to do with mucks. I don't want to take off my shirt. That'd probably be like a violation of your code of conduct. So I won't do that. But what do you individually stand to gain as a result of telling better stories? I'm not a scientist. I can't tell you that telling better stories and creating stronger content is going to provide amazing health benefits or make your skin glow or make you look 25 years younger. But here's what I can actually tell you. Telling better stories makes you better, makes other people better, shares new perspectives of what other people, and it can help your business grow. It helps, it's a stepping stone in identifying new members of a potential community and bringing them in. And those members of that community could eventually become users of your code, your software, right? It solidifies your knowledge and it makes sure that you actually know the thing that you're talking about rather than just kind of BSing your way through it. It helps you think, create structure and hierarchy and stay organized, right? It helps build your resume, like to be able to point back at things, the things that I've done, and have sort of a public persona represented of myself rather than just a blank page. Just like the areas that I talked about today, it helps you to create that structure, that hierarchy, creates a conversation and serves a purpose for moving a conversation forward. It helps you become just a better storyteller. I think it's a little more engaging to tell interesting stories. It educates, something I'm personally passionate about. And it introduces you and your listeners to new points of view, which would never happen if you weren't sharing your story. It can change lives. It can change lives. And there's one last thing that I will leave you with that was, again, a quote from my speaking coach, Jennifer King. If there's anything that you could take away from all of this, it's to create an experience in the stories that you tell, because that's really what people will remember. Even if you don't follow the framework or don't remember anything else, when you're sharing the experiences that you've gone through, make sure that you're creating an experience in somebody else's brain as well. That's all I have. I put spooky bats on there. I'm so glad that we didn't have any Friday the 13th incidents with the tech today. That's amazing. All my resources are through the QR. You're welcome to scan that. I also have brought postcards that I put my home address on because I quit. I'm done with the Twitter thing. Too old for that. They're on the back table. If you liked any of this, please write me, and it will go back to the U.S., and I'll see it hopefully in a couple weeks. I would love to get feedback that way. It's kind of fun. Thank you. Thanks for having me.